Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Orlando Magic episode of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Baspris, and you can find me on Twitter at Dan Baspris. Please, as you're settling in, as I always do, ask each of you individually, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button if you're watching on YouTube, and a handful of you must have been newer viewers on Spotify because we got a few new stumbles over his words reviews over the last couple of days. So thank you for that. If you have an opportunity on Apple or Spotify to drop a 5-star, that would indeed go a long way. The Magic last year were a team beset by two key injuries, with Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero each missing a hefty chunk of the season. Paolo more so. Both guys had sizable injuries. Franz got back from his a little bit quicker. He missed 22 ball games. Paolo missed 36. Not to be outshined in this battle for health futility, Jaylen Suggs missed 47 basketball games this last year. No longer on the Magic, KCP played in 77. Goga Batadze played in 70, and you'll never believe it, but Jonathan Isaac actually played 71 games last year for a Magic team that finished at 41-41. But of course, the story was that they just didn't have their guys. They didn't have their three horses, and this offseason, they went out and they spent an absolute boatload of draft capital to get Desmond Bane to shore up some of the offensive issues that they've had in these last couple of seasons. Floor spacing certainly being a big part of it, because as good as some of these basketball players are, they're not particularly awesome three-point shooters, at least not yet, and Desmond can jack up and then hit some three balls. So from a reality standpoint, what does this mean? Well, our buddies over at FanDuel, yep, that's right. I want to make sure you guys are aware of our partnership with our friends at FanDuel, have the Magic at 50.5 is the season win total number. That is a big number. Now, I get it. This is a good basketball team, and if they are healthy and they play well, they should clear that number. But again, jumping 41 to 51, it's not really the same as when you go from 21 to 31. It's just harder to get those next 10 wins. 51 and 31, which is what they would need to be, again, per the number over at FanDuel, is 20 games over 500. That's not a cheapie. Not by a long shot. What do I think? I don't know. I mean, I'm going to go through, I'll do my breakdown on all this stuff. I do think that one of the things to keep in mind is that, you know, if you look at the year before, forget this most recent season that just ended, where the Magic were, by all accounts, a disappointment. They were particularly bad. I mean, I guess they weren't, I mean, they just like weren't good enough at home, frankly. The same home record as the Pistons. Pistons were just a pretty good road team, and the Magic were kind of like, meh, on the road. They were bad. The year before is the one that I wanted to point at, when the Magic went 47-35. And that's the team you're kind of looking at and going, okay, well, if that team, which was basically this team but healthy, got to 47 wins, what does Desmond Bane do to them? Can he get them to 51? Can he? Yeah. Will he? I don't know. Again, the team has to stay healthy, and in particular, like the main guys do. The flip side of it is the Eastern Conference is not good. Not good. In any event, that's your number. But you guys care more about the fantasy side of things. So let's get into the best player from this past year from a fantasy standpoint on the Magic. This is including the player that they just collected. Actually, it's pretty close. Desmond Bane was actually the highest ranked 9-cap player last year, but we'll get to him second. And that first player we're going to talk about is Franz Wagner. Franz finished at number 38 in 9-cat this year. Again, played in 60 out of 82 games. He had one big injury that cost him pretty much all of that time in the middle of the year. Averaged 24, 6 and 5, 1.3 steals, 1.7 three-pointers, 46% from the field, 87. Very solid free throw shooter. 2.3 turnovers, kind of like your poor man's Kawhi Leonard type of fantasy lines. Not quite as good in field goal percent. Not quite as good at blocking shots. Not quite as efficient. But they are built from a fantasy standpoint, at least, in relatively similar ways. Like looking at Kawhi this last year, he was at 22, 6, and 4. Excuse me, 22, 6, and 3. 2.1 combined defensive stats. Where we just talked about Franz at 1.7. Kawhi shot 50% from the field. You can see a lot of fantasy similarities between the two guys. But Franz Wagner's season was very much a tale of 3 seasons rolled into one. There was Franz the first week when Paulo was there. Then there was Franz for the almost 2 months that Paulo was gone. And then there was Franz again when Paulo came back. Also, by the way, Jaylen Suggs went down during that stretch as well. So for a while in there, it was really Franz against the universe or against the Space Mutants, depending on whether you like the first or second iteration of that regular Nintendo franchise. I think it was, and we can dig in a little bit deeper on this, but I'm fairly certain that Paolo Banchero went down 2 weeks into the season. So if you wanted to just look at everything excluding the first couple of weeks, Franz was number 31, so he jumps up a little bit there. But again, if you exclude now the time after Paulo came back and basically just remove the first 2 weeks and go up to basically the All-Star break, Franz was number 11 in 9 category leagues. That was when he was really going crazy, taking 21 shots a ball game at a 46.5% field goal clip at 27, 2, 6, and 5. 2 was the 3-pointers, 1.9 defensive stats, still had that nice free throw number on pretty damn high volume. That's Kawhi Leonard. But that also came when no one else was really playing. Jaylen Suggs was effectively the number 2 field goal attempt guy during that window. And he was taking 14. So there was really a lot of time. And I think Paulo came back before the All-Star break. So if you really wanted to get the full Franz experience, you could even go a month sooner. And he was number 5 if you look at November, beginning of November to end of January. He was a mid-first rounder, 28, 6, and 7, 2.5 defensive stats, and a high volume 91% at the free throw line. That is straight, that is vintage Kawhi Leonard, but it was Franz Wagner. But again, 21 shots a game, no Paulo. Yeah, Jaylen Suggs was there for most of this time. Franz wasn't even there for some of this time because he had gotten hurt in there. But he was asked to do all the things, and that's just not what his job is going to be on this iteration of the Orlando Magic, because not only is Paolo back and not only is Jaylen Suggs back, but they brought in Desmond Bane, who was no usage chicken last year. He took 15 shots a game and 3 free throws with 5 assists from Memphis. So we can feel how we want to feel about where Franz sits in the Orlando Magic pecking order, but the reality is there are just too many guys around for him to do what he did last year. Because Franz, when the team was fully healthy, and you could look at kind of the last 15 to 20 games of the year, he was still getting up around 19 shots. There was no Jaylen Suggs during this stretch. He was number 76 over that span because the steals were low. That's a number that'll bounce around a little bit. But otherwise, the defensive stats, the 3-pointers, and the lower free throw volume, that took away sort of a lot of the zip on his fastball. I don't think he's a top 75 guy because you assume the steals will be better than that. You assume the free throw volume would be a little bit better than that. We can't know for sure. But to me, and this may be the case with a number of Magic players, I think Franz gets a little bit overdrafted this coming season just because of how unbelievably good he was during the Paulo absence last year. And there are more mouths to feed in Orlando than last season. So I'd be looking for Franz probably in the 50 to 70 range. If I could get him there, I'd feel pretty good about it. I think he probably finishes around that 50 zone, kind of like how Zach LaVine ends up there, despite being a very good scorer. As I think we're probably going to see Franz more in like the 18, 17, 18, 18 and a half at most, probably shots per game this coming year. And that just makes him a little bit tougher to trust. Speaking of tougher to trust, here's Desmond Bane, who's awesome at basketball and fantasy basketball. But I'm also a little bit worried because Bane has, he was healthy his first couple of seasons. Remember that first season he played 68 games, but that was out of 72, and then he played 76 out of 82. Last 3 years, he's missed 24, 40, and 13 games. This is 13, not too bad. But he also saw his playing time and activity go down significantly this most recent season with Ja Morant back around for Memphis again. And so if Desmond Bane, and this is sort of a different handicap than what we were just talking about with Orlando, Bane goes from being kind of like almost locked in. Ja Morant was the number one guy. JJJ had kind of pushed himself into the number 2 seat, and Desmond Bane was the firm number 3 on that Grizzlies squad. I think he's at best, again, a third option. And more importantly than even the pecking order, it's, well, what were the first 2 options doing for Orlando? And like Paolo and Franz together were taking almost 40 shots a game. They were at like 39 and change. Ja Morant was at 18. JJJ was at 16 and a half. That's 36 and change. So there was more, by all accounts, left over for Desmond Bane in Memphis than there likely will be in Orlando. Now, perhaps he pushes himself all the way up to those 15 shots, and it's actually Wagner and Banchero who do a little bit less. But even if we assume that that's the case, there's kind of no way for Bane to do more than he was doing for the Grizzlies without supplanting someone who was already in Orlando. And I don't see that as a reasonable outcome here. Don't get me wrong, I like Bane a lot. He's a high field goal percent guard who hits 3-pointers, gets steals and assists and scores, and actually rebounds pretty damn well for someone with shooting guard eligibility. But also, I'm a pragmatic sort, and this is not a guy who's going to average more than the 19 and whatever points he did this last year. Very good 3-point shooter, very good free throw shooter, good field goal percent guy, so it's sort of easy to keep his rank from falling off the edge of the table. But also, like, he was number 32 this year on about 15 shots per ball game. That's probably a best case scenario for Desmond this coming year. I don't have the first clue where he's getting drafted. I'm assuming it's going to be later than where he finished because of the move to Orlando. This, he finished sort of a mid-third rounder per game. I think he was drafted generally in the 4th round this past year. He probably goes somewhere in that 4th round again, which seems basically fine. I wouldn't go early 4th on Bane. I just, like, at that point, you're now praying for good health. But I think you can make an okay case to make him a late 4th round pick. And there he's, I guess, kind of safe. Next on the docket is Paolo Banchero, who you guys know I am not at all interested in 9-category leagues. His game just simply doesn't translate to 9-category fantasy basketball. He is bad at field goal percent. He's bad at free throw percent. He's bad at turnovers. His 3 weak points are the difference between a points league and a 9-category league. And so I just, looking at his rank from last year, it almost seems insane that he averaged 26, 7.5, and 5 with 1.4 defensive stats, 2 threes, and he couldn't get himself ranked inside the top 130. Now, to that end, there are a lot of ways that Paolo Banchero can be fantasy useful. If you are playing 8-cat, for instance, he jumps from 130 to 91. So already he's inside the top 100, but at the same time, he's also not a guy who's going to get drafted near 91. So that's not enough. Just 8-cat isn't enough. What if you're 8-cat and punting free throw? Now we're starting to get somewhere. Now he's up to number 55 in rankings, which is much closer to where he was getting drafted this last year. What if you switch that to punting field goal instead? It's not quite as big of a jump. He jumps to number 69. So the problem there, of course, is like, he's a guy that because he scores so much, he's going to get drafted inside the top 50, even in your category leagues, I would assume. And unless there's another pretty good but effectively a first efficiency spike for him. He was 45.5% last year, 45.2% this year. Free throws have been exactly the same. 3-point percent has basically been exactly the same. Unless there's what would now be kind of the first of his career improvement in efficiency, it's hard to see him being worth drafting even in a double punt because you still have to take him super early. Also, the turnover free throw double punt is not nearly as common as the turnover field goal double punt, which again only got him to around top 70 this past year, which again, I realize seems crazy, but he's also not that big of a defensive stats guy. So he's not floating you there. He's just giving you the points league primary counting stats. Points, boards, assists, that's kind of it. And yeah, he's doing a lot of them, but it's not enough. So if you're in a double punt, let's say hypothetically you're in a turnover field goal percent double punt, and he falls near the edge of the top 70, sure, yeah, you do it. But I don't think he falls that far. So I don't know that you ever really go down that path. And plus, you got to be really locked in. Not to mention the fact that, even if you're a turnover field goal percent double punt, you're still now dealing with the fact that he's a bad free throw shooter, which is a category you probably are counting on winning if that's your double punt. In any event, he's likely a pass for me. I'm just not a Paolo guy. If you're playing a points league, have at it. Let's talk Jaylen Suggs, who has yet to make it through an NBA. Well, that's not true. He mostly made it through last year. But rookie season, he missed 34 games. Second year in the NBA, he missed 29. Third year, he only missed 7. That was the start of what maybe appeared to be a little bit of a turnaround. But nope. Then back to this, another heavy missed dose. 47 games missed this most recent season, which is a shame because he was on his way to having far and away his best season as a pro. 16 points, 4 boards, almost 4 assists. He was at 2.9 combined defensive stats. The turnovers were painfully high, and the field goal percent was not very good, but he was making 2.2 threes. He had actually turned himself into a good foul shooter, and now he gets pretty obviously pushed down the pecking order. He's also looking at the Jaylen Suggs thing right now. He was number what was the final count on Suggs? Suggs is number 89 in 9 category leagues, taking just under 14 shots per game. But again, a lot of his activity this season came after Paolo Banchero went down. So just like we do with Franz Wagner, you kind of have to look at what was Jaylen Suggs before and after Paolo was in the lineup. After, he was taking a clean, let's actually just cut this off a little bit sooner. Take it to New Year's. There we go. That pretty much eliminated Paolo. He was at 14.5, even approaching 15 at times, shots per game when Paolo was out. And his rank wasn't all that different overall, but 17, 4, and 4 with 2.4 defensive stats and over 2 threes, and the free throw was good. It took a lot to get him there. But then if you kind of look farther down the line, and it's hard to go much farther down the line because Suggs got hurt, so you could also look, I guess, at like the first week and a half of the season. I know it's an extraordinarily small sample size, so I don't know that this is really going to tell us the data that we're hoping for, because he was also shooting the ball much better at the beginning of the year, but he's only taking 13 shots at the beginning of the season. So you kind of have to figure out, okay, well, like, is it enough? Are there enough shots at the beginning of the year for Jaylen Suggs to be fantasy relevant? I'm tempted to say not really. He was shooting 46%, and he was at 3.1 combined defensive stats to start the year. He was knocking down all of his three-pointers. Everything was going beautifully for him. And then, things leveled off a little bit. My guess this year is that Suggs is probably somewhere in the 100 range. He's not somebody that I'm going out on a limb to draft. But as we've talked about before, there are a lot of options out there of guys that are good at 3-and-D type stuff later on in fantasy drafts. It's part of why Dyson Daniels is not that important to go get at the beginning, because someone like Jaylen Suggs is most likely going to be flip-flopping around outside the top 100. And at that point, you're like, all right, well, I guess I could do it, because what if he can stay healthy and play 30 minutes a game? Could he give me 1.6, 1.7 steals a night? Could he give me 0.7, 0.8, 0.9 blocks per game? Could he give me over 2 3-pointers on only 12.5 to 13 shots a night? These are things that are within reach for him, if maybe not quite as much a given now that Desmond Bane is around. So I would look for Jaylen Suggs probably outside the top 110. I think I'd rather grab him after my first set of high upside flyers, because I don't think that Suggs is going to come in. I don't think he's going to shoot 88% at the free throw line again. I think that was a sort of an anomaly in the high direction. I think there's a possibility his field goal percent is a little bit better, so maybe those things cancel each other out. But again, I don't know where the 13 shots come from now with Desmond Bane in the mix. So again, later round pick, 10th rounder, I think, is probably the sweet spot for Suggs. And I don't think that I'd go any sooner than that. I'm not super high on this last guy, but I wanted to mention him just because he's a guy that gets discussed leading up to fantasy drafts pretty regularly, and that's Wendell Carter Jr., who just doesn't have fantasy game. Another year, another season of Wendell not doing anything besides score a little bit, rebound a little bit, and this year it wasn't even on a good field goal percent. I mean, like, what are we doing here, guys? I don't think I need to go down this path. I think there's a chance that a healthy, coming back, I should say, Mo Wagner at some point this year. They still got Goga Batadze. I just see no purpose in this at all. Like, Wendell Carter Jr. hasn't been a fantasy threat since that basically 2021, when he was taking 11 shots a game and he was averaging a double-double. And even then, it was kind of a stretch because the field goal percent wasn't that good, 52 and change. Free throw percent has been generally kind of a small to medium negative, and he doesn't block shots. So you're getting a center that doesn't really give you the center stuff, but also doesn't really give you the guard stuff. I don't understand why everybody just keeps giving him shot after shot after shot on their fantasy team. I think we've seen way more than enough to know that Wendell Carter Jr. is just like the world's best scenario is he gets somewhere near like the top 125, but I don't think that's happening. Not when the Magic have other choices, whoever they may be, because Carter's just not that good. He's fine. He's like the prototypical definition of fine. On top of everything else, he stopped hitting 3-pointers this last year. It looked like he was kind of figuring that out for 2 or 3 seasons prior, and then that went away. So he just did nothing to warrant a fantasy spot this last year. He was barely ranked inside the top 200, and I just don't think he's good enough where they're going to shoehorn him into minutes anyway. He's not a guy that they need to give more playing time. couple of the names on the Magic that caught my eye as I was scrolling past them. Batadze, he was sort of interesting when Wendell Carter Jr. went down. Jonathan Isaac, who I think the Magic have figured out they pretty much only can play him like 18, 19 minutes a game to keep him healthy, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. They got some pretty good backup point guards on this team now, in Tyus Jones and Corey Joseph. Corey Joseph, by the way, is 14 years in the NBA. That surprised the heck out of me, but I knew he'd been around forever. I guess it was more surprising to see that he's only 33. Thought he was like 39. Anyway, you're not drafting those guys, just something to keep in the back of your mind if a bunch of dudes get hurt. And then Mo Wagner, if or when he comes back, he's not going to do anything consistent, but he certainly could put a dent into any other fantasy stats for big men. Not enough because we didn't really care about the big man situation anyway. So you're likely just dealing with Franz Wagner, who I'd like to get in the 50 to 65 range. Probably doesn't fall that far. Desmond Bane, who I think I'd also like to get somewhere near 50, and you might be able to this time. Banchero, who I just don't really have an interest in 9 category leagues because I don't triple punt. Jaylen Suggs, it might be the Magic that I end up with in a couple of spots just because there is a little bit of steals upside with him, where if he has a particularly elite swipe season, that's how he could have a really nice record or rank on the fantasy side. So look for Suggs. I don't think he gets drafted inside the top 110, and I'd like to get him, 10 to 15 slots a little bit deeper than that. And I certainly wouldn't even consider anyone on the Magic beyond those 4 main dudes. That is your Orlando Magic show. Remember, our friends over at FanDuel have their over-under at 50.5. If you think these guys stay healthy, that's a number they can probably get to. But right now, the juice is loose. It's minus 130 on the over. So the public thinks they're going over that mark as well. Might be a reason to consider fading that number. But again, if we're getting to 47, 48 wins before the whole team got hurt and everybody's gotten better and they added Desmond Bane, it does kind of feel like in a bad Eastern Conference, Orlando ought to be able to get over 50.5. Ought being the key word there. Hit that like button on the way out. Make sure you subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, just take a second to go find that 5-star button. It's a little annoying to find on Apple, but Spotify, it's right there, slapping you in your face, which is what I'll do if you don't drop the 5-star review. Find me on social at Dan Vespers or at Old Man Squad. Back with you again tomorrow with another team breakdown. So long for today.